Hi, today you're going to learn everything about the basics of authentication inside of Toddle. We're going to use Resend as our email provider to send one-time pins for users to authenticate. We're going to set everything up on the back end with sending out the emails, creating the codes, validating the codes, and all that stuff. And it's going to be super simple. You don't need to pay for MemberStack. You don't need to give them, I think, a 4% or 5% cut of every sale you make. You don't need Outseta. You don't need any external vendor. With Toddle, you have it all in a platform and they don't take a cut. And you're free to choose with whatever vendor for payment processing you want to work with. So we're going to build the whole authentication flow today inside of Toddle without you having to pay for any additional vendors that will handle this for you. It's super simple. It is fully no code. We don't need to write a single line of code. So let's get right started. So first of all, before we start, I actually, with those kinds of things, I actually like to start with the logic first. So let's go to Xano and let's set up the basics here. So first of all, I want to go to my database. I want to create a user's database. And the good thing is I'm already in my sample endpoint. And let's see. Okay, perfect. I'm in my sample endpoint and I want to create a new user's database. So in here, did I just leak like all my users' emails? Okay, no, thank God. Okay, I'm in the sample one. I was like, ooh, shouldn't have done that. Okay, we're all fine. No information was leaked. Let's go to add table. And now let's create a new table for authentication. This is very important. So we go to enter data manually and let's call this email users. And now we're going to make this UUID. This is more secure than normal sequential ID because that would be like 1, 2, 3. And you know, those numbers look, those are harder to guess. Like give me one human who can guess that kind of numbers, you know? So let's start here and uncheck CRUD endpoints because I'm not a believer in CRUD endpoints. I like to build endpoints from scratch. So let's add that table. And now we have added a table. Now we want to optimize this table inside our database for authentication. Now, what we probably need to do is we need to add a column for email because we will, need to enable sending emails and sending them a code via email. And we need to have a second column that will be text called one-time pin OTP. You can name it however you want. I just prefer to name it that way. And now, here we go. This is our authentication database. You're doing great so far. Now we're going to click on the 3 dots on the top right corner here, and we're going to go to settings. Now inside of settings, we see this section called authentication. We want to click on it and enable it. This will now turn our regular database into an authentication database that can be used to authenticate users, create authentication tokens, and then validate those tokens and see if the user has access or not. And now, in order to confirm everything we did, we're going to click on Save. Now we have set up an authentication database. And we're just like at minute 4, so we're doing fantastic. So now let's go back to Toddle and, why don't we just start like building the form? What we can do here is we're just going to add a form, and inside the form, we're going to add an input, and under the input, we're going to add another input for the code. And in the form, I'm going to add a button. It doesn't need to look pretty right now. It just needs to be good enough for us to play with, play and get a connection to the APIs. So, but before we try to get a connection to the APIs, we got to do one thing. The first one needs to be set as an email field. So we click on the first input and we change the type attribute to email, because this will be our email. And we can change the placeholder to say email just so that it's easier for us to understand what we're doing here. Now, on the second field, we're going to go and we keep this as text because this will be our code. And I can change the placeholder to code. And now, here we go. Now we want to go on event, on form submit, on click, and for now, oh no, actually not on click. No click for this. On this form, we gotta go to form, on submit, and we just want to set prevent default so that when we click this button, we're not submitting the form while we're testing. So this is just a bare bone UI just to test the endpoints that we're going to configure right now. So just heads up, what we need to do is we need to have an Resend account. So we need to make sure that we have a Resend account. And just so that you know, we're going to use Resend today for sending the emails. So they have their emails in here, and under API, I should see the email documentation that Resend gives me. We just want to have this pulled up for now. I just wanted you to know that we're going to use Resend for authentication. But now what we want to do is we want to go to APIs and create a new API group for this specific project. I call this email Auth, for example. And now I'm just going to add a new API endpoint. And now under API endpoints, I'm going to go to custom endpoint. I will make this a post request because we will be sending data in email to our backend. And now we're going to call this one-time pin. This endpoint will be requesting a one-time pin for a user that either exists or not, and we're going to smartly add or edit the user based on, you know, if the user already exists in the database or not. Now we're going to click on save, and after we clicked on save, we now want to add an input to our API flow so that we can, you know, receive data and work with it. So on the input part, I'm now going to go to email. We find this under other in Xano, and we click on email, and we just name this email because it's the email. And now let's add an input, and now we can just type in an email, hey, at NoCodeProCode.com. No advertisement, but if you want to learn more about Toddle, feel free to visit NoCodeProCode.com. We're going to have daily office hours about Toddle. We have great courses. It's a supportive community with great educational materials. Daily office hours where you are like in Zoom meetings and you get help immediately to get unstuck and to sharpen your knowledge around Toddle and all your skills around it. Just to throw that in there. But this should be it. We got that set up. So now what we want to do is we want to go and add a function. And the first function that we want to add is an add or edit record on our email users database. That will be the database. Let's just duplicate the tab and let's go back to our databases real quick. That will be the database that we have created right in here. So we want to link it to this database, and now we want to target those fields by email because the main identifier when a user logs in will be their email, as you can see in the database here. So we want to target this specific email field inside our database. In order to do that, we need to go to field name in Xano and go to email users fields and go to email. This will now target the email column in our database. And now I can go to field value. The field value would be what would be in this cell. You know, this would be the field value here. So we want to look for the row that has the field value of the inputted email. So we go on input and we look at the inputted email. This will represent what we will put in here that will go into our API. Now, this is how we do this, and now we just don't need to touch anything yet, but I would save this now, and let's add a stop and debug under it, because this is super helpful for debugging. Let's go to email users, let's save. Now I would just, publish it for now. When I would run this, you will see that I have created a record. And if I would run this again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and I reload, it stays with one record. We have not added 20 records right now. And this is very important to understand because we don't want to, every time a user signs in, to create like 5 new records for the user, because that would be a little bit inefficient and would cause a lot of roadblocks, to say it very nicely, later down the road. So we don't want to do that. But what we want to do is we want to go, where do we go? We want to go in here, and we just want to rename the output a little bit so to have it nicer. I like to just, call this user underscore record. We go on save, we update the preferences, and we go on the 3 dots, and we name this, and we're going to name this as set user OTP / create user with OTP. OTP. Here we go. So because in this we're going to create the user or not. Now what we need to do also is we need to generate an OTP. In Xano, inside of the functions, we have a cool function called random number. I like the random number function because it is great to generate OTPs. So I just add the random number and move it over the user record function that we just added. And let's move the stop and debug under the random number, and I tie it to x1, which currently represents the random number. And what I want to do is I want to click on the random number function, and I want to have a 6-digit pin that will start with 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, so 6 times 1, and that will end with a max of 999, 999, so 6 times 9. So now, if we would run this, as you can see, we would be getting always like a different 6-digit pin that is completely random, and that will then be tied to the user. And now we can go in here, and we can call this function generate OTP for user. So we're generating a random auth number for our user. And we can call this OTP number. And we're going to save it, update preferences, and now we run it again, and it still works, so we are fine. Now we want to move the stop and debug under this, and what we want to do is we want to go to add or edit record, and we want to scroll down, and we see, here you go. Remember, we have the OTP field in our database. So we want to set the OTP in the database so that we store it, so that we can reference later back that if the OTP that the user inputted from the email they received is actually the one that we assigned to the user, so meaning it's correct or not. So now we're going to go to Xano, and we're going to go to the OTP part, and we're going to click on this little eye icon, and we now see like there is like a value field popping up. I click into the value field, and I map it to the variable that we generate for the OTP number. I click on save and publish, and now let's map the stop and debug on the user record, click on save, run, and now we see we created this item in our database for this user with this OTP assigned. Now let's reload the database, and we see we have that user with this one-time PIN. So this is great. Now, how does the user get the one-time PIN? We still need to send them an email. And doing that is super simple in Xano. So what we want to do is we want to go back to Resend, and we want to go to their documentation. We're going to see the documentation for send email. This is exactly what we want to do. So we want to send the email, and we want to make sure that we scroll and we go to curl, right? And we copy this, and now we go back to Xano, and we're going to go all the way here, and I'm going to click on plus under set user OTP. So when we add or edit the record, and I'm going to do an external API request. I click on external API request, and now I go to import curl. I paste this in here, I import, and as you can see, it has imported the whole request. Now, the only thing I need to do is I need to update my API key. So now I can go and just remove the number they have in here, or I could tokenize the text. So I could do API key, just like that. I write it with those tokens. I copy this, add a filter of replace. search for this tokenized text, and now my replacement, which can be an environment variable if you want to be more secure, would be your API key. So let's go to settings and let's look at integrations probably. And no, that's not where I want to go. How about we go on usage or documents? Let's see. No, I need to go to usage. No. Oh, API keys. We got it right here. So let's create an API key. Let's call this test video. Oops. Test video. And now permission is sending access. Domains, this will be viralful.com. Let's add this. Let's copy this key. Let's go and add the key in here. Let's update this. Now we got this all working. And now I need to update the from address. So the cool thing when you do this, you see like you have the address in like those arrows. What we want to do is I can add the name in here, which can be viralful. Here you go. And I can now update the email to be the email on my Resend account. And how you add custom emails to your Resend account, this is something that you will find out if you look at their documentation and all their YouTube videos. So now we have, here we go, and I could do like auth at viralful.com, viralful.com, here we go, and now I go on update, and I go to to. Now in this to part, I want to, of course, send this email to the email that was inputted into my API, because if I'm calling this API, I want to get the code to the email that I inputted to call that API, right? Because I want to, I want to get the email. So we map this to the input of email so that the email inputted in here will be the email receiving the code. And now we want to go to the subject, and the subject can be your viralful code is, and then we can add brackets and we can put code in caps in here, right? We can do that like this, and we can copy this, right? Oh, I gotta do your, and we copy this, and then I go on add filter, and I use my favorite filter, the replace filter, and I search for this tokenized text. Here we go, and I go on replacement, and now I go to my variable with the OTP number that we generated. So what it does is we have this text, your viralful code is, this will be the template, and then the replace function will look for this thing, and it will replace it with the dynamic number that we generated here, so that we have like a dynamic subject line. And we're going to do the same thing with the inner text. You know, I can have my paragraph in here saying your OTP is, and then I add code, for example, and I copy this tokenized text, and I add a replace filter, replace, I put in this in the search part, the code parameter that I want to replace. I go to variables and I map it with my OTP number that was generated dynamically. And now I go on save, and now I should be receiving emails. So I got my phone right with me here. And now we're going to see if I will be receiving that email. So, but first, before we do this, let's name the step. We always want to have documentation in place. So we call this send user the OTP one-time PIN via Resend email API. And we save this, and we can name the output. So the output that comes out of this variable, we click on it, go to output, and we call this resend underscore API. Resend API, and now we can publish it. And now I want to go on my stop and debug and look at the Resend API, go on save, make sure we publish it again. And now let's see if I will be receiving an email. We scroll down, it's status 200, so it seemed like it was successful. And now, as you can see, I just received my email here, and ignore like the 500 unread emails that I have. I'm still responding to all your emails, don't worry. It's just getting a little bit overhead. But yeah, and actually there's a typo in the email, so let's correct this. It has to say your OTP, not you a OTP. Your OTP is. Update, save, publish, and now we got that fixed too. But I received the OTP code. So this is amazing. So I'm getting the code. Now let's connect this with our front end, remove the stop and debug. And we don't want to return anything. We only want to return in this part a text saying success, right? Because we don't want to, we don't want to kind of like cause any return of API keys, because if you would see, the result of sending that email would contain the authorization header of, my API key, which I don't want to share. This is why you should have those as environment variables if you want to be very, very secure in what you do. But it's also always good to just like cut the headers out and like kind of like cut the request part out of anything that you return. But yeah, those are things that we talk in office hours all the time, how to make what you build even more secure. I don't want to get over myself today. But now we got this. This is the one that will send the email. So now we can copy the endpoint URL and we go to Toddle and we click outside of the canvas, just like this, and I go to APIs. I click on plus and now we can create a new API. And look at that, I'm in Pasadena. And now I go to API and I call this OTP one-time pin. Let's stop auto fetching for a moment and let's put our endpoint URL in here. And the method is a post, because as we see, this is a post method in here. So we can't call it with a get, we have to call it with a post. Now, if I were to start running this, you will see that it will say field value, a field is missing because we haven't added our body yet. Now, let's look at this. We need to receive the body with the content of an email, right? The email is the input field. So what we need to do in Toddle is we go on the body and we click on FX. And we click on plus and we add an object, right? And we need to add an object for email. We need to add an object, and the key in the object for this item has to match the input in here. So the object is kind of like the form that is being sent to Xano, and those fields need to match. So we have the email field in here. So this needs to say email. And then I can go on plus in here, and I would then add my email in here. Now, the question is, how do we map the email value that needs to go in here now to the input field for the email? Now, the way to do this in Toddle is by mapping it to variables. So we're going to create one variable. By the way, a variable is kind of like a piece that stores a specific dynamic data, right? So we have one variable for email, that we need to go to the initial value and just delete the null so that we have it empty as two quotes. So now we have the email, and now I go to the email input and I go on attributes and I go to bind to variable. I click on bind to variable. I click on email, and now when I type in my email, hey at NoCodeProCode.com, and I will go outside of here and I look at the variable, you will see that the variable contains the value that was inputted in my email field. And now I can go to my API, go into the body of the request. The body is like the content that is attached to calling that API. It's like the attachment of an email. I go on plus and I can now bind it to the variable that contains the value of the input field, since they're binded with each other. And now this will look like this. It will send the email, and this is exactly the input of email that our API needs to receive. So now we close this here and we see that it was successful, right? We get the success that we responded. So now let's see if I got the email. And yes, I indeed got the email, as you can see right here. So I got the code. The code is 987095. Now let's see if this is true. If I go to the database and reload, we should see, yes, the code is 987095. So the code is matching. So I have the code here and I have the code in my database. This works great. So now we need to have another API that is, validating that if the code that I'm inputting is actually the code that is in the database. Let's build this right now. So let's go back here and let's go into our email auth API folder and let's add an API endpoint, and we create a new custom endpoint that is a post endpoint because we're sending data again, and this will be called verify. Here we go. We call this verify. And now we go on save, and the input of this will be, of course, as always, our email. So we name this email. We add the input, and then we will also add another input as type text, calling a one-time PIN. That is the OTP that the user will add. And now in this function stack, we want to test this out. So let's go to our database again, and let's copy the email that we know is already in there. And we go to the OTP, and we copy the one-time PIN that we know is the right one. I'm going to paste it in here. And now, we can run this, but nothing is happening because we don't have anything in the function stack defined yet. So let's start with that. Now, I just simply go to add function, and we want to probably add a get record because we want to get the record attached to the email, because otherwise we don't even know if the PIN is right or not. So we want to go to the get record. We need to bind the get record to email users. That is the database here where the magic is happening on further authentication. And now we have the field name. Again, as we had before, we need to look at the column that we want to look for indexing, for identifying the proper record, which in this case is the email, because that is the common denominator. That is the email value that is giving us all those information. So I go back to Xano here, and I go to field name. This will be the database column. And I click in here, and I go to, the fields. Oh, I go in here. I remove the existing. I go to email fields, email user fields, and I go to email. So this will now target the email row, the email column. And now I go back to Xano, and the field value, this will be what is in the column, in the row for this column. This will be the input of email. So I go to input email, and then on output, let's name this nicely. We call this user underscore record. I save this, update preferences, and for some reason I have two edit. I don't know what happened, but let's just delete and let's see. Yeah, that is all. It is all good. Okay, perfect. Save. Okay, now we go in here and we edit the description. We call this get user record by email, so we know what this step in our function stack is doing. It is very important that you name them because you don't want to get confused with everything that you do. And now we can add under the function a stop and debug, and we go to the variable of user record so that we're going to stop and return it. So now when I run this, you will see that I'm getting the full user record from this row in my database that is matching this email, and we're only looking based on the email. So this is great because this contains the OTP. So now we can run a little validation to see if the inputted OTP matches the backup OTP that we store inside of our database. And in order to do that, we can utilize a precondition, because if this precondition fails, there is no way forward. It's just going to throw in an error. And if it is successful, we can execute logic below it. But even before we do that, I would like to get a clearer image of this specific OTP. So let's add under this user record, let's add a create variable. And the variable will be called backup underscore one-time PIN, OTP. And we're going to go to our user record. And this is, just keep in mind, let's just save this for now. This here is returning the user record. This is the return of this user record function. I'm going to copy this. I go back to create variable and I go to my variable for user record and I go on subpath. I paste it in here. This will be the response coming from that step and I can click on define. Now I can define the dot notation. Xano calls it subpath. So I can expand on this and I will see ID, created at, email, OTP. In this one, we want the OTP. So I click on this button here saying OTP and I click on save. Now the stop and debug under it, if it returns the backup underscore OTP and I run this, we will now have this variable that is the backup OTP that only contains the OTP. That makes it easier for us to work with, and later on, if we come back after a few months, easier to maintain because we have a better understanding of, you know, what this variable specifically contains, better than if you have like 50 input fields and they all like come from different places and you don't know where they are defined. So that we also have a clear understanding of what this does, I click on the three dots, I go to edit description, and I call this define user backup OTP. Here we go. And now we have the variable that we can work with that makes it easier. Now we throw in the precondition. So we look for precondition in Xano. And now we click on this little pen icon here to define the condition. We want to look that if the input OTP equals the backup OTP, meaning if those numbers are equal to each other, meaning if they match. If they don't match, the error message can be wrong OTP, just like that. And then the error type can be access denied. And now we can save this. And now I can name the step. I don't know why Xano is now adding 2 steps all the time. This is kind of like funky. But doesn't matter because this one seems to kept all its setup, which I'm happy about. We go on the 3 dots and we name it. Naming is everything. And I think that was a little bit too close to the microphone. Sorry. So here we go. Naming is everything. We call this only continue with flow if OTP is valid. Here we go. Only continue with flow if OTP is valid. Now, if we run this, we will see I can go to my stop and debug actually, and I can type in valid. So now when I run this, I will return valid. Now, if this number is not valid, let's add like a 0 at the end. It will, you know, say wrong OTP because this precondition is fetching and this precondition is stepping in, and you know it's saying no, you can't go further. So you can't go to the place that would return valid because it is invalid. We don't let you go one step further because what you did is not right. Now, if I were to correct it and remove the 0 and run again, now it would say, yes, everything is clear. This condition is right. And now we continue with the step that would return valid. So this is how you do the logic on the Xano part. And the most powerful feature about Xano is this logic builder. There is no other backend tool that does it like Xano. It's top tier. That's why they're a monopoly, because it's top tier. So now under here, we will create an auth token, meaning if this was successful, we want to click on plus and create an auth token. So we can create authentication token. And now we need to go to our database that we want to base this on. Now in this example, let's look at our database. It's email users. So we go here and we go to the email users database. Now the expiration is 1 day. So we want to go to Google and we type 2 weeks in seconds, or however long you want to have it. And now, I want 2 weeks, not 1 week. Enter weeks to calculate seconds, and I got my seconds. Let's copy this. I love those sketchy websites that help you with very random tasks. Let's remove the commas. because we need to have it as an integer. If it says integer up here, you know you're doing it right. And now we need to map the ID of the user. So let's just skip this and click on save. And let's go one step back up on the user record. So let's go to the stop and debug and map it on the user record. Go on save and run again. Now we're returning the user record. I want to create another variable like we did it with the backup OTP only for the user ID, just so that we have it more organized. So I click on plus. Under this here, I'm going to go to create variable, and I call this user underscore ID, and I go to the value, and I go to the variable, and again, I click on subpath, paste this in here, go to define, expand the arrow, and I want to target the ID. So I click on the button called ID. I save this, and now I go on the stop and debug, map it to the user ID variable that I created, run, and now I have a variable only containing the user ID, so everything is more organized, clean, and can be understood after that project is handed off. So now we want to click on the three dots, go to edit description, and we call this define user ID based on user record. Define user ID based on user record. Here we go. Now let's see if it still works. Beautiful. Now let's delete this function. So the stop and debug. Let's add another stop and debug under here, under the auth token. Save. And now we go to create authentication token. And now we go to the ID. This will be the user ID for this particular user. So I go in here, I go to variables, and I link this to my user ID. This is all I need to do. I click on save. And now I go on the three dots, and I call this create auth token based on user ID. So I know that I create this auth token and that it is linked to the user ID. And now we can run this, and because we entered the right code, we create an auth token that can be saved as a cookie by the front end that will then allow the user to authenticate. If I now would add like a random 0 at the end, it will not create the auth token because the user is not authenticated using the right credentials. Here we go. Now, if the user came this far, for security reasons, we want to reset their code, because if we refresh the database, we see that their old auth token is still in here. Now, if they were to request a new one, it would be overwritten the way we have set up the logic. But for best practices, we still want to remove it just to make sure. So let's go to Xano and let's add another step down here. And let's call this edit record. And we go to email users based on the database that we have everything based on, of course. And again, we go to email because we want to target the email column, this one right here. And now we go to the field value. This will be what is in the field here. And this will be, of course, mapped to the input of email like we had before. We don't touch the OTP, or actually we touch the OTP. We go to OTP and remove the input of OTP. We keep this field empty. This will reset the OTP. So now we can name this function, we can add a description, and we call this reset OTP to clear the field. Reset OTP to clear the field. And now we go on output and we can call this new underscore user underscore record. New underscore user underscore record. We publish this, and here we go. This should be under the auth token just to make sure that the auth token gets generated properly. And now we can run this again. Everything still works. Let's look at our database, and the auth token after successful validation should be cleared, so that if we would try to run it again with the PIN, it would fail because the code is invalid because it was already used for security reasons. So people cannot share their account, and you can then, force this to log out the user so that account sharing is not easy to, be used by users, so that they make sure that they have to buy the seats and all of that stuff. So, It's like Netflix. We cracked down on account sharing. But let's try this again. It all seems to work brilliantly. So now we want to connect this with the front end. And then the front end magic happens. We're going to work with animations and make it just look beautiful. So we copy the endpoint URL and we're going to go to Toddle, and I'm going to go on on X. I just exit everything and we create a new API. Let's go on plus and let's call this verify. Now we remove the auto fetch. We paste this in here. And now we go on post. Now, this is all set up because now we're calling the API, as you can see here, but there are some fields missing. So like before, we go to the body and we go on an object and we create an object for the inputs of this API. We need email and OTP. So we go inside of our object and we add the key for email and we add a key for OTP. And in the email field, I'm going to map this to my email variable. Now we need to do the same thing for the OTP input field as well. So I go to the OTP input field and I click outside of the canvas and create a variable called one-time pin. And I go to initial value that needs to be empty. I close it and I go to the input that will receive the verification code. I go to attributes, bind to variable, and I bind it to the one-time pin variable. So now when I type in a pin and an email, so let's do hey at nocodeprocode.com, hey at nocodeprocode.com, and I type a code in that is random, and I look at our variables. We see the email is my email, and the OTP is the code that we have inputted. So now we need to go on the verify endpoint, and I go on the FX, and now in the OTP part, I map it to the variable containing the one-time pin. And now I close it, and now that is it. So now let's just manually trigger those things, and let's just make sure that we have auto fetch off. I like to use it for testing, but make sure you keep it off. So now let's just remove the code and let's just go through the process. My email is in here, just like that. And now I go on OTP. I click on auto fetch. I got my OTP sent. I just, I'm waiting right now. I just got it on my phone right here. And now I want to type in, first of all, let's remove auto fetch. Otherwise it's going to, I clicked it again, so I gotta wait for the new OTP. Sorry. Let's just wait. Did it work or did it not trigger it? Let's click again. Okay, that was a success. Let's wait till I get the code sent. But it may just started going to the spam. Okay, here we go. I got it. Now make sure to turn auto fetch off, because there's no play button to test the APIs. Now let's put in the code. The code is 72258. Also, let's look at the database if it is really the code. Yes, we have the code for hey at nocodeprocode.com, and we can remove those. Those are they're occurred by autofetch. This is why I'm telling you, turn autofetch off. This is just for debugging, and you want to turn it off immediately because Toddle doesn't have a play button to test the API. The code is this one, so the code should be valid. And now I want to go to my verify API. I want to turn it on, and of course it's going to say invalid. I don't know why. Sometimes it has that issue, but if we try it on the live side, it should work. So we have the input and we have the code that should be working. So, sometimes it's having that issue with Toddle, but that shouldn't hold us back from testing it because we have a different approach to test it. I want to go to this button and duplicate the button. I go on the form and paste it in here. So this button now is going to be called request email. And this button is going to be called, how do we call this? Verify OTP. Here we go. And now I'm going to go to this button, request email, and I go to events, click, and I tie this to the API call to get the OTP. And then on verify OTP, I go to the event on click, and I go to the verify endpoint. That was it. So now I should be able to run this flow, and it should be working brilliantly. And let's just make sure that auto fetch is off on both of them. Auto fetch is off. Auto fetch is off. Beautifully. So now I want to go and type in my email, hey at NoCode, hey at NoCodeProCode.com, hey at NoCodeProCode.com, and now I go to request email, and now I should be getting an email. It'll take a little bit, and I got my email, and I put in my code. That is 548914, and now I click on verify OTP. Let's exit the play mode. Let's click on verify, and for some reason it's saying wrong OTP, which I think is very funny, because I think the way we validate it should be right. So let's go back to our API endpoint and let's debug this. Let's go to request history and let's look at this. The input is and contains the OTP, and the output is that it's the wrong one. So why is it giving us wrong? That's a good question. Let's look at the database. So the code I inputted ends with 914, and the code I inputted ended with 914. So let's look at this. Let's troubleshoot this error. Let's paste the code in here, and let's try it in the run and debug. This is how we debug things. If I were to run it, it would... it returns 2 records for some reason. I don't know what's wrong with Xano today. It always does everything 2. That may be causing the error. So let's reload. And it's now saying wrong OTP because it cleared it, of course. Yes, but if I put in the OTP of 888888 and copy it now and go on my front end and put in the code of 8888, verify OTP, go to verify, it still says wrong, which is interesting. So let's copy the cell here. Here we go. And let's reload. Okay, so it failed the precondition for some reason. Let's just hide the clear function for now. Oh, I don't know what's wrong with Xano. It's just not working today. Let's go all the way down because I can't even hide it. Okay, now it worked in hiding it. Maybe they did like an update or something that messed up everything. That could be. Let's run this, and it's working over here, right? When I run it, it's working, it's working, it's working, and we're not clearing it, so it's working great. Now let's run it. It could also be that maybe there's something funky because the Toddle extension isn't properly loaded. I could think about that too, but let's run this for now. Let's go back to Toddle, and now we add all our 8s in here. Here we go. And now I go on request OTP. And now I go on verify, and it's still saying an error. So what I want to do is I add a paragraph in here, under there. Let's go to the body. Let's go to text and make sure that it's all white. Here we go. I click in the text here. I go on FX. I go on the verify. I go on JSON filter, so I turn it into text. And now we go on the live side. This is how we can see what the API is telling us. Let's go, hey at NoCodeProCode.com, and let's request the email. Let's look at the email. I got the email. So the code is 7391123. And let's go to verify OTP, and it's still going to say wrong OTP. Very interesting. Let's request it again, and it's going to say wrong OTP. Maybe I'm missing something. We receive OTP, and let's troubleshoot this. Let's go to the API endpoint. Oh, damn. I typed in OPT and not OTP. Might as well just name it code. Name. That was the error. I'm so sorry. Let's see if it works now. Oh gosh. Let's reload. Let's reload. Let's reload. Arc is not reloading. Now we go. Hey at NoCode procode.com request email. Let's request the email. Hey at nocodeprocode.com. Always make sure to double check your spelling. It'll be important. It's always very important. So let's type in the code. That is 2, 3, 8, 5, 4, 7. Verify. And it looked like it was successful, but for some reason we didn't return the auth token, which makes me a little bit nervous. Why? Because our endpoint is returning the user record instead of the auth token. So we got to go to response, and we go to response and we map the response to the auth token, and we publish it, because now when we run it, as we can see in our test, it even returned that. Now when I run it, it should return that. And I also want to enable it, so we reset it again. So I create the auth token. The response needs to be the auth token. And then I want to still, run this here to reset the OTP. Make sure everything is published. Very important. And now I'm going to go back to my front end and let's test it in here. Let's reload this whole thing. And let's type in hey at nocodeprocode.com request email. Now I will get the email sent to my phone. I got a lot of emails on my phone here. Now from this, let's reload. I got the email. The code is 17656. Verify OTP. And now I got my token. So this works. This is how we can also test it on the live side. If you ever want to do that, I like this tip to test it just by setting text. But now it should also work on the back end. I like this. This is like almost like a video. The NoCode, ProCode, Toddle debugging tips. It's almost. So let's try it again on the front end so that we have the data to map it properly. And let's go hey at NoCode procode.com. Hey at NoCode procode.com. And now request email. I will be getting my email any second. I hope that I'm not like using all my credits now, and we're just like we ran out of credits today. That would be fun. But I just got my code, and the email is 7757701. Verify OTP, and it worked. So now, since I got that data in here, I can just go on my Verify API, and after the Verify API, I got the events in here. So on success, when it was successful, I will go to set session cookies, and I will have this access token field here. So I go on FX, I click on plus, and I go to my verify request, the Verify API that we're working in it. I go on data, and this will now contain the access token. So I want to set the access token. This should expire in exactly the same amount of seconds as the API, as the auth token is valid for, right? So 2 weeks in this example. I will paste that in here. And then on success of this, we can redirect. So go to URL to /dashboard. So /dashboard. I go on done. I exit this. And now after we successfully did everything, I will be redirected to the dashboard. So, and the cookie will be set. So now we want to make it beautiful. So first of all, we remove the heading, and we want to add some styling to this. So let's go on the form and let's go to the styling section. Let's give it 1 rem or 0.5 rem side padding. 0.5 rand top and bottom padding. Let's zoom in it and we can have more style control a little bit. So let's go to background. Let's make the background gray 800. Beautiful. And first of all, how about we go to light mode? I like light mode. So let's make this as white as possible. Let's go to the form and let's make this gray 50. Beautiful. Let's give this a border radius of just a border of, gray 200. And we can give this now a border radius of 15. So we got nicely rounded borders. And I go to the text input and I go to the background colors, and this will be full white. And I go to the border again, and I go and make the border 200. And I go and I can make this 1.5 pixels in border width. Oh, actually, 1 looks better. Let's do 1. Here we go. I got 1. And now we got to go to the text color to give this a text color of 700, just like this, and make the borders maybe like 10. So it's even rounder and looks more beautiful. And then the height can be 3 rem, for example. Ooh, that's a little bit much. 2.5 rem maybe. Yes, that looks like the sweet spot. And I want to give this a padding on both sides of 1 rem. That looks beautiful. Or maybe 0.5 rem. 0.75 rem. That looks good. Yes. I'm now going to repeat the same principle here. So I'm going to make the border, the background fully white. And now I'm going to go to the text. The text is gray 700. So go on this little magic icon, go to gray 700. The padding is 0.75 rem on both sides. Here we go. And now I go on the height, that is 2.5 rem. And I go to the border on plus. I make this 1 pixel, and this will be 200. Here we go. And now I give this a border of 10 pixels. Beautiful. So now I just go on the form and add the gap in here for 0.5 rem so that they don't kiss each other. And then we have request email and verify OTP. And there is a nicer way to manage that, is with just one button that has conditional logic. So let's just keep them for debugging, but in actuality, we just want to have the button in here that will have conditional text set. So we can do like prompt for now. Okay, so we want to make this button look way nicer because it doesn't look nice right now. So we want to go to background. We can give this like a light blue background. I'm a big fan of that. And we can give it a border that is a bit more of an intense light blue. That is like maybe like blue 300. And that seems to look very nice. And we got to make this width 100%, so it's across the whole, 100%, so it's across the whole thing. Here we go. And the border should be 10 pixels like the other ones above. And here we go. And now I can go to the text, and the text can be blue 500. Oh, that doesn't look that great. So how about we do a different approach? How about we make this blue 50, and the border will be blue 100, so it's a little bit more subtle. And then we can make the text to be blue 600, and I think that will look very nice. So this can then be like request OTP via email, right? Request OTP via email. And we want to make sure that we want to go to the layout, flex, and center it. So we have it nicely centered. And then I can move actually those buttons for debugging just outside of the form and remove them in here and see how nice it looks. I think it looks beautiful. Request OTP via email. We can make the size like 15 pixels, and that looks beautiful. I really like it. So we have request OTP via email, and we want to base this actually on a state if the email was sent or not. So we want to click outside of here and go to variables, and we create a variable called send email, right? Or we want to do email sent as a state. The initial state is false because no email was sent. And now I want to actually go to my OTP request. So whenever I request an OTP on success of this, I want to set the variable for email sent to be true because the email was sent. So this is very important. I add my email, hey@NoCodeProCode.com. I'm not going to send it yet because I'm going to add a heading in here to test this, right? Oh, where did my heading go? I probably want to go in styling and change the color back to something dark so we can see it. I click inside of the heading on FX and I bind it to the variable for email sent so I can visualize the state to you. It's now false, right? We have it false. Now when I click on request OTP via email, it's doing nothing because we're not requesting it. So first of all, we have to go to styling and remove this ugly hover. Beautiful. And now I want to go on this form, and on events, I need to add a switch. I need to add conditional logic. And now we got to think 2 steps ahead, even though we're 3 steps back. But you know, it'll be all make sense at the beginning. At the end, not at the beginning, because it's not making sense right now. But it will all make sense at the end. I go in this switch. The green part is true. The red part is if it's not true. So the condition will be email sent is false, and we will make this not. So email sent right now is false. If the email was not sent, this will be true, so it will go this direction. So this direction, everything that will go after here, is the logic that is executed when no email was sent yet. And when no email was sent yet, I'm going to request the OTP first. That is it. And then when the email OTP was sent, on success of this, I want to go to my variable email sent and mark it as true. And then on the other side, if this would be true, this would be false. So it would go to the else part. So else, if the email was sent and the user submits the form again, I'm going to run the request to verify it. And then if it was verified, you know, we will have the other part of the logic happening that we hard coded into the verify action on the success event, which will be setting the cookie and redirecting, because, you know, the verify will always do this. So now this is what we do. So now when I, in theory, click on this button one time, I'm going to get the email sent. Let's look at this. I should receive an email. And yes, I indeed received the email. And now, when I go on here and type in the code 601530, and I click this button again, I should be redirected to a page that doesn't exist. So it's 601530, right? And let's look if this was called. It was called, yes. And it was successful, so on success, but of course it didn't redirect to dashboard, which is completely fine because I think we don't even have the dashboard page set up yet. But you know, you get the idea. This was successful. So this is working. So now we can remove those as a helper for us. I still like to keep the state because we want to display success messages. So now we can add a div in here, and this div in here can contain a span or any form of text element that is going to notify the user what just happened. So let's just go to the div and let's just go to styling, and we give the 0.75 rem padding and top and bottom 0.75 rem. Just like that, or maybe 0.5 rem. Yes, that is beautiful. So this message can say the your OTP was sent via email, just like that. And I can, you know, center this message, and I can go to background, and I can make the background 100% gray, or does it look good? It's okay. And I go to border, and I make the border 300, for example. And now I give it rounded borders of maybe 10, 10 pixels. It looks very inviting now. Here we go. Or actually, how about we do it green, but I think that will be very colorful. I don't want to have it too colorful. So we can make this gray 50, and I can make the border gray 200. And I think that's very nice. Or actually, how about we make this a little bit lighter, almost white. Yeah, that looks very nice. So now I can go to the attributes. I can bind this on the show attribute if email sent is true. So right now it's not true, so we don't see it in here. If I click on it, it was not sent because I haven't added anything. So if I add hey at NoCodeProCode.com and I click on request OTP via email, after the email was successfully sent and we got the response back, it's going to say your OTP was sent via email. And now I got the OTP sent via email, as you can see in here. And I can type in the OTP, which is 912-982. So 912-982. I click on request OTP via email. Now we would have to change that text, and now we're being redirected, and of course that page doesn't exist. But as you can see, the authentication flow is working amazingly already. So let's continue. So now the next step is, in this authentication flow, we want to change this text dynamically. So the first step is, let's copy what we currently have and let's go on fx. Now we click on plus and we throw in an if formula, an if statement. And I bind the condition of this if statement to the status if the email was sent or not. This is how we manage state in Toddle. And now this is false. So if the email was not sent yet, it should say request OTP via email. And then if it, if it is false, actually it needs to be the other way around. I need to put this on the else, so that way it will show, right? And so again, email sent. If email sent will be true, this line will be returned in here. And if it is not true, which it is false right now, the else will fall into place and this will be returned. This is why this will be returned here. So now after we requested the email, it should say verify your OTP. Verify your OTP. Here we go. So now let's just reload Toddle just to make sure that we are up to date on everything. And now let's try this authentication flow again. So I type in my email. This will be hey at NoCodeProCode.com. Let's just zoom in. Oops, that was a little bit too much zoom. Let's zoom in here. Okay, beautiful. Hey at NoCodeProCode.com. Now let's request OTP via email. And now as you see, the text changed. So it also says verify your OTP. And we also have this here saying your OTP was sent via email. Beautiful. So now I got the email successfully. Now I go into the email and I verify my code. This is 8088883. So it's 8088883. And now I want to just go in here to my global API call to do the verify. And I want to do one thing. I want to go on success and on success of setting the cookie and remove the redirection so it doesn't mess up the whole editor. And now I want to verify it. And I want to go to this. It did mess up the editor. I had to refresh. Okay, let's try it again. Let's give it one more try. Let's go to verify. And let's see, we should have, we removed the redirect. Let's try authenticating again without any redirect. Very important. So now let's go to hey at NoCodeProCode.com. It's hey at NoCodeProCode.com. And now I request the OTP via email. I just got the email sent now. And now while I'm waiting for the email, I gotta make this a little bit tinier. This should be font size 12, and it needs to have way bigger padding. It needs to be 0.75 top and bottom, 75 rem, and oh, that looks beautiful. And we gotta make the text color a little bit lighter, so it's like just like very decent, very subtle. We do like, maybe a little bit more. Work of art. Here you go. So I just got the pin again. let's put the pin in here. So this is 133355. Let's verify. And the verification seemed to be successful. Let's look at our verify endpoint. And yeah, we got the auth token back. So it was successful. So now what we want to do is we want to also have like a message in case it was not successful. So how about we add a random 0 in here, and this came back as not successful. So what we want to do is we also want to have like a state that, for example, if it had an error, because this came back as an error, so we can look for if an error existed to then display an error message. So I can copy this div here, and we can then also paste it in here to reflect error messages. And we can make the styling a little bit more aggressive because we have an error. So I go to red 50, and then for the text, I go to red 700, and I can type in here, there was an error with your OTP. There was an error with your OTP. And you can also make this dynamic, of course. And then I can go to the border on this here, and I can go to the magic colors, and I can make this like 100 so it stands out a little bit nicer. So I can say there was an error with your OTP, and I want to show this based on the verify API error, and then if the error message equals the error message of wrong OTP, and then you can base like different visibilities based on whatever error message is in there. So right now we have an error message. Also, I don't want to show this your OTP was sent via email if we have an error message. So what I can do is I can go to the logic that I have here that will, kind of like hide it or show it if there is an error message. And I can go to this here, and I can look for an end, and I can paste this logic in here, and then I can make this not. So I only want to show this if there is no error message, so I can reverse it. And now this should hide this as well. So very cool. In Toddle, like, you don't really have to think about the logic. I didn't think like a little bit about making this logic. It's common sense. So the moment I used Toddle, I stopped like thinking I'm thinking like 70% less, which is great. Less headaches. It has so much benefits thinking less. So start using Toddle. But here we go. How this works, in case you want to think a little bit more, think about it like this. We have email sent that is true. And I only want to show this email was sent successfully if the email was sent true and the verify error message does not equal wrong OTP, meaning the error message, there is no error, right? This is when I want to show, hey, your email was sent, everything is fine. Till now. And then for this one, I want to show this if the error message equals wrong OTP. If this is true, this will be shown. So now let's see how this flow looks in real life. For that, let's reload Toddle and let's see if we can authenticate. Let's reload Toddle. Oh yeah, it's reloading. So it's just my internet being slow here, or Toddle having a bad day. And I can also remove this H3. It's not needed anymore. Now I can go in here and I can go to hey@NoCodeProCode.com. And now I request OTP via email. I just got my email sent. Let's check my phone if I got the email. And yes, I indeed got the email. Let's go to the email, and the code is 60950541. And now I go to verify OTP, and the OTP was successful. So now we would get redirected, which we don't have in place yet. So let's go to the redirect, and first of all, let's create a page for dashboard. I want to show you now how to gate pages. So let's go to dashboard, and let's create this page. Now we have a dashboard page. We want to go and make the main div 100% and a height of 100%. And we want to make sure that, of course, the background color is all the way white and the text is a little bit darker so we can actually read it, right? And we can center it in here. And now what I want to do is I just want to display like the user email or the user ID that is logged in. But we don't even need to do this right now. I just want to gate the page. So let's just add a heading of saying gated. Now it's not gated yet, but it will be. It will be gated. So we're going to go to the home page here, and we're going to go back to the global verify API. I'm going to go on my global success, and on success of setting the cookie, I'm going to go back to go to URL, and I'm taking my path of /dashboard. Because if it is on the same URL, like if it is on the same URL, you can just do /dashboard. You don't need to repeat the whole URL. So I go on done. And let's just make sure to reload Toddle just to make sure that all the changes had time to propagate successfully. And let's try logging in. So now I do hey@NoCodeProCode.com. Now I request my OTP via email. Now I got the message that my email was sent. Let's see if I already received it. Yes, I just received my email. Let's go on the email and let's type in the code. The code is 920980. Just like that. And now I click on verify OTP. Now it should be verifying, and I'm going to go to the gated page. Now we want to make sure that first of all the cookie is set, which is great. And now we want to create an auth me endpoint that will allow the gated page to determine if we are even allowed on this page. Mind blowing. And now we're just going to go back to Xano, and we're going to go to add API endpoint, and now we can actually use something that Xano already built for us. We're going to go into the authentication panel, and we're going to go to Auth me. The Auth me endpoint needs to be tied to our database for email users for this one. So we tie it to the email users database, and we just keep it as is and save. And now when I run this and, for example, add my account here and run, I will be getting the user information, which of course there will be more user information based on what you store in your database. So now I can copy the endpoint URL and I can go to Toddle. And now we want to go on our dashboard page. And our dashboard page wants to have the API added, and we can call this API auth me. And we want to have auto fetch on to make sure that the authentication happens before the page is loaded. We paste this in here, and now it's saying unauthorized, authorization required, right? But what we also want to do is we want to do authorization, and here we go. Keep in mind the API call before already set the session cookie. Now I go to authorization and go to access, to bearer access token. This will be the cookie that I saved in the request before. Remember the request that we had on the home page that was verify, on success, set session cookies. This automatically sets it as the access token. So then if I go to my dashboard page, here we go, and I go to my API, I just go to authorization for that user. So Toddle actually does some of that authorization work for me that otherwise a tool like MemberStack or Auth would do for you. And I just map it to the access token here in the bearer access token. And as you can see, it is taking the cookie, it is taking the auth token that Toddle stored in the session cookie storage. And it's then loading this API call and it's providing me the user information. This is amazing. So then what I can do is I can add on, if this API is executed on error, meaning the user does not exist, I can go to URL / that will be the home URL. So if the user is unauthenticated trying to go to this page, it will not work. So now let's try to go to this page. And of course I'm authenticated because Toddle passed on the cookie. But if I were to try this in another browser, it would not work. Other example, if I were to delete this record from the database, it would also not work because I'm not authenticated now. So this is like the hard refresh. So if I would go back to Toddle and open this page here, it should not work. For some reason it is still, maybe it cached something, that could be. but it should not work. So how about we add a paragraph and we make it visible what's going on the back end. I like doing that. Let's go to FX. Let's go to auth.me and let's add the JSON so we turn it into text so we can see what's going on. And let's open this page and we see it is loading but we don't get any data. The data is null. So, but it seems like we still have a success event. So what we want to do is we want to actually modify the auth.me endpoint. So let's add a stop and debug in here so that we want to throw in an error so it fails on the front end. When I run it, it's returning null. And what is happening right now, it is returning something. So even though this is an error because the user is unauthenticated, the front end is still thinking that it is not an error and that everything is going smooth, which we don't want to happen. So we want to add, again, our friend precondition, and we want to make the not prepend text. Oh, I clicked on the wrong thing. I want to do a precondition, and the precondition needs to be based, let's click on the pen, if the email users does not equal null, meaning it's not empty. So now let's delete this empty precondition that was something randomly added. And now we see we get an error saying precondition failed. And I can call this user unauthenticated. User unauthenticated. And I can do this access denied. So here we go. Now when I run this and the record does not exist, the user is unauthenticated. And now when I create a new user record, for example, hey at NoCode.com. Boom, I don't even need to have an OTP. The user just have to exist. And now I go in my search and I map it to this user that exists and I run it, I would get the user information. And we can use this on the server side part of our front end to then kick off, unauthorized users. So let's do this. So what we want to do is we want to remove the stop and debug. And now we just want to name the steps. We can say get user record from auth token. And the way it does it, by the way, is if you look at this ID, there is this auth part that contains the ID, because remember, we added the ID in the auth token, so we can take the user ID, link to the auth token to get the user record. And then we can call this throw error if user does not dies. We don't hope that something bad happens to our user. Does not exist. Throw error if user does not exist. Here we go. We publish and now we run and this should work. And if the user is non-existent, meaning it's not in our database, we should throw an error and effectively redirect the user. We throw in an error. Everything is published. Let's see if this works in real life. So let's log in here. And we see that we are redirected immediately, but that page still loads. So let's see. We have auto fetch. I think maybe there are still some limitations on if we can really authenticate that fully server side. So because we still go on the page, so it seems like we have client-side validation. But of course, you should only load, you should have all your API endpoints attached to your dashboard authenticated as well, so that they will not return data to your user if the user is unauthenticated. Just make sure to have that as well. If you want to learn more about that, feel free to join office hours. Happy to help you make all of them authenticated. It is a great value that you're getting out of there. But we see that we are here authenticated. If I reload, we're not. But what we want to do is we want to maybe add like a side loader here, just to have something that looks nice. And we see we're immediately redirected, which is probably not the best thing for testing right now. So let's, go to home and let's just reload and let's try creating a new account in here. So I go to hey at NoCodeProCode.com. So I have hey at NoCodeProCode.com. By the way, NoCodeProCode.com, if you want to become a member, You get much more of this in daily live Zoom meetings. It's amazing. It's a wonderful community. And now let's request the OTP via email. And now I want to reload my email inbox. And here we go. And I type in my OTP, that is 132797. And I verify my OTP. And now I'm on the gated side, as you can see, and I'm authenticated. That's why I didn't get redirected. But until this was successful, I want to add a loading screen in here. So let's go on the gated side on the dashboard. So you can see we already called this based on everything we have. And we want to add like a nice loader, like a nice, thing that, like visually just doesn't show our content before the user is fully authenticated. So I go on the div and I add another div. And this div will be absolute. And it will be width 100%, height 100%. And I'm going to go all the way down to the little CSS panel. And I'm going to do backdrop filter blur open close 13 pixels close. Now we got it blurred out. So we can make it even a little bit more extreme, like 20. It's blurred out. And now we can do something cool. We can go into the middle, give it like a little padding just so nothing gets out of border. We do 3 rem, and let's go on Google and let's look for CSS loaders. Let's look for some nice CSS loaders. That looks nice. Let's copy this HTML, paste it into Toddle. It didn't seem like I copied it successfully. Or no, actually, it's a span. I didn't know it was a span. Interesting. Let's paste it in here. Boom. Let's add a style. And in the style tag, I'm going to go to the CSS, copy their CSS. And I go back in here and paste it in here. And I should have my loader. But we want to make sure that that loader is dark. So we should probably be able to go to the span and change the text color maybe, or maybe not. Yeah, doesn't work. I mean, it still looks good, but we want to make sure that people can for sure see it. So we want to go maybe to the CSS a little bit and change some colors. So we have the keyframes and we have everything in here, and that looks very cool. But let's just ask ChatGPT, or it's FFFFF. How about we do 000? And now I got it. Here you go. It worked. It worked. I didn't even need ChatGPT. So now we have a loader. So if we go on the page, we have a loader in here, until it was successfully authenticated. So I want to go on this div, and what I can do is I can go to styles, and I can go on style because we want to have it nicely fade in and fade out. I think that is very cool. So I go on FX, and I type in a conditional if statement. I go to the condition, and the condition will be based on API is loading, is not. Here you go. So if it is not loading, right? It's not loading right now. So then if it's not loading, it should be opacity 0, z index -1. Here you go. Because it should be opacity should be 0, it should not be visible. And then z index -1 needs to be all the way in the back, because if it is in front of our content still, it can't be clicked. Like I can't click buttons and all of that because it's like this loader thing is in front of my content. So I want to kind of like take this and reverse it. I want to do then, if it is not, I want to do opacity 1 z index 999, and then I do semicolon. And then I can go on styling, I can go to transitions, and I can do a transition of all. And then I can add a little delay of like 200 milliseconds just to make it very nice. And I can make like the transition 400 milliseconds. And now let's see how it looks if I go on the page. Oh, that was no nice transition at all. Let's just reload and see. Maybe we gotta adjust. It looked very nice here, so maybe it took a little bit for the change to propagate. It did not. Maybe it is too fast. You know, maybe Toddle is like just lightning fast. I think it's just the way that it is lightning fast. It's just too fast. Look at it. You can't even make loaders working because Toddle is just super fast, and it's probably also executing some of it on the server. But there's no content flashing, so even if your connection is not so fast, or you're authenticated, or not authenticated, it seems to work. So how about we kick me off the database just as a double check, and let's go in here. And now, as you can see, if you are not authenticated and it's still trying to validate everything, as you can see here, you still, you have like that loader. But I think we should tie the loader based on if it was authenticated successfully and not just if it was authenticated, because you see at the end we were able to see the text for a split second, and I think that's not like a great user experience. So what we should be doing is we should be approaching this a little bit different. We should create a variable called authenticated, right? And please don't base anything important on this variable. This is just to manage nice UI states. So actually, let's call this different. Let's call this show loader. Just not to get you on any wrong ideas. So let's call this show loader, and this will be initially true. Show loader will be true. And I go to my loader on the attribute, and I change the logic for this to be show loader. So now I have show loader, so I have to keep the not because I have it other way around. So show loader, if show loader is true, we're going to show the loader. And I ideally wanted to switch them, but because I have them in the wrong order, the not operator just reverses it, and it works beautiful. So now I'm showing the loader, right? And then on this API, when this API was, success on error is good, we redirect, but on success, only if that API was successful, I want to go to my show loader variable and make it false. And now you see, if I go in here and I'm not authenticated, I will see the loader the whole time, and it will not be removed, and then I will be prompted to go to the authentication page. So now I log in, hey at nocodeprocode.com, hey at nocodeprocode.com, and I request the OTP via email. And now I got my email, or I'm about to get my email. It still hasn't arrived yet. And now I got my email here. So it's 441546. I verify via OTP. And now, as you can see, I'm on my gated page, and here's my user information loaded on this page. Beautiful. And now, if I remove myself, as you can see, I'm in here. So if I remove myself from having access to this gated page, right? If I were to do that, and I were to go exactly on the same page, just reload the page, I'm not authenticated. Oh, dashboard, here we go. You see I have a loader for a split second while it is authenticated, and then I'm redirected to log in or to create my account. So this is actually log in and create your account in one thing, you know. So I can go one last time, hey at nocodeprocode.com. I request my OTP via email. Now I will receive that email very soon. I got like my message, your OTP was sent via email. And now I enter a completely wrong OTP. It's now going to say there was an error with your OTP. So now I'm going to type in my right OTP. That is 439372. And I verify via OTP, and now I'm going to go on the gated page, and on the gated page, my data is loaded, and now you can take this data and display dynamic information, and you have like a whole gated page system that you can use to build dashboards and all of those information. And if the user does not exist or is kicked off your platform, just like this, Or you could even base this like has paid or not. The user would just go to the page here, try their best in reloading, and the user would be kicked off the page because they don't have access to it. So this is how you can implement an authentication system inside of Toddle step by step. And I will also make this into a template that you can just copy paste. It takes you 5 minutes to set up, not 1.5 hours. 5 minutes to set up. You'll have a clonable Toddle project. You'll have a clonable Xano snippet exclusively for all NoCode Pro Code members. Now, if you don't want to have the convenience of just clicking a button and cloning it and just, saving yourself a few hours of work, you can just follow this tutorial step by step. Everything that you need to set this up step by step is in this video. You got all the knowledge that you need now. But if you want not just the knowledge, but also the convenience to cut a little bit of the corners, just to go to the end result faster, there is a full clonable for exactly this on nocodeprocode.com, so you don't have to rebuild it all yourself. This is where the membership is here for. It's for you to move things faster, to gain a better knowledge, and to save time at the end of the day. So we have in the membership daily office hours Monday to Friday, where you can join the office hours. It's great for beginners, and it's great for people who, that advanced use cases that struggle to implement certain things. And we're here to help you wherever you are and what side. And then we have great events in there. We have courses, in-depth courses like this, much more like this actually, very detailed in-depth courses for all those things. We have a great community. Ask for help, tutorials, templates like this. The template for this thing that we did in this video is exclusively available for all members. So we got great benefits. You get, I think at day one, you get your $79 like 3 times already out with all the value that you're getting like on day one. Even just what you can use, because there's so much that you can use. And, there's a lot of things happening on the community, on the membership. If you just take a look at the dashboard here, like we got office hour recordings and we got our events. We had a special event with Ray Deck, the Xano expert. We have like a little where you can request like custom tutorials and all of that. We have like a 2-hour course. Check this out. A 2-hour course just on SMS authentication in Toddle. Beautiful. And, we have a 2-hour course on how to build a micro AI SaaS inside of Toddle. And then we have like a 1-hour course on the Toddle logic basics. And this is just reposting a video. And then we have even more because we also have templates, right? So this is everything that you get in the community. You have a template for the AI voice generator for Xano and Toddle. And we had like a special event, like a special webinar where we did like an app migration. We have more office hours recordings. They're all like mostly over 1 hour. Some are like over 2.5 hours. We have like sometimes special guests. Ray is sometimes our special guest. We have great events. We have daily office hours in here. We got clonables, right? More office hour recordings. We got even more great clonables. Stripe Connect. I also have it for Toddle specifically, member only, tiny MCE. So we got great alternatives. We got even like behind the scenes. Then we got more office hours. We got a lot of office hours already, and they are all being recorded. So there's a great educational resources. We have specific tools, and we have like documentation. Not going to expand this, only for members. Oh, I did expand it. And we have tools and frameworks only for members. Another course on authentication. We have lemon squeezy copy paste for Toddle, Xano copy paste elements. For Wist, we have like a reverse proxy tool. We got a lot of exciting stuff in the community. I would love for you to join. It's specialized. You get the most value out of the community if you use any of those 3 tools, Toddle, Wist, or Xano, or any of those I did a thumbs up. I like it. You get the most if you use any of those tools, but we also have a lot of people coming with super base questions and, happy to help with that as well. But most of the community members are either Wist or Toddle front end and back end Xano, but super base people are happy to join as well. But I just wanted to give you this information that this exists. But regardless if you join or not, I'm just super thankful for you for watching this video, for being with me here almost 2 hours. I wanted to give you like a little sneak peek of the kind of content that you can expect from the NoCode Pro Code membership. And this video here is like something that I would normally not do on this YouTube channel, just because it takes 2 hours and it takes more hours. It took probably 10 hours to make this video with all the prepping, figuring out how to do this, doing all the research, trial and erroring the API. So there is a smooth 2-hour experience today to showcase you everything. I can't do that every day for the video, but this is why we have the membership, to do those advanced things that take more time, to give you this great value for a super little price. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that today was very beneficial and very helpful for you to get you unstuck in authentication in Toddle. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments or send me an email. I'm happy to help. And if you want to join the membership, the link is in the pinned comment and in the description, and you can also just go to nocodeprocode.com, send your application video, because we have a community and the office hours and the courses. We just want to make sure that it stays a safe environment for everyone to be in. So there is a little video that you have to make of yourself to join, and then once we see you and we have a feeling that you are a great fit in that community, we just send you the invite and you can just onboard and create your account. So thank you so much for watching this. I really appreciate all your support. You don't know how much every comment, every like, this all means to me. I just really appreciate it. I'm very thankful for everyone watching, for you, and for the whole Toddle team just supporting me and just being so nice and so welcome and so open-hearted in welcoming me in the Toddle community. You don't know how much this means to me. It means the world to me. It means everything to me. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.